Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack 4 Business Podcast.
So, here's a question for the audience. How do you turn a stressful home renovation into a smooth, enjoyable experience without sacrificing quality or sanity? That's exactly what Colin from Delta Designs will be talking about. He'll share how his engineering mindset and Kaizen approach brings clarity, precision, and calm to even the most complex projects. Whether you're managing a build, leading a team, or simply trying to improve how you serve your clients, Colin's insights will show you how small, continuous improvements can completely transform the results. Our guest today is Colin Meredith from Delta Designs here in Ottawa. He's the founder of Delta Designs and originally from Nova Scotia, and began his career with a degree in mechanical engineering before moving to Ottawa for a role in IT. And over time, his passion for hands on creation led him to transition into home renovations for over more than 20 years. A decade later, he took the leap to run his own company, where his engineering mindset brings big picture innovation and precision to every project. Rooted in the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, continuous improvement, Colin believes there is always a smarter, more efficient way to build. Away from work, he enjoys life with his wife Annie and their two kids, Max and
That's
Emily, while continuing to craft homes that reflect the same care and creativity he values at home. Colin, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Welcome. And hey, do you have a favorite quote or saying?
when it comes to renovations, there's no problems, only solutions.
That one very much so. This reminds me of the commercial realtor. He says, if there are no problems, there are no opportunities. What pulled you from engineering and IT into home renovations? Because that's quite kind of a transition. One is it's in the cloud and or it's plugged into a wall as a module to, hey, let's rip that apart.
Yeah, well, it was kind of more of a push than it was a conscious leap. In the early 2000s, there was a kind of a big transition as the tech bubble burst and leaving a lot of highly skilled IT people fighting over a few jobs, while at the same time, the renovation building industry was growing strong.
So that pivot though, it's interesting because I mean, if I reflect on what work you do, and you do great work, and your team does great work, that's kind of a transition because there's some people, some tradespeople, all they do is one piece. They either do flooring, they'll just do electrical. Yours is a little more a broader spectrum. What made you pick
Yeah.
that versus like just one super niche?
Well, when you talk to clients, their needs mostly are a turnkey package, right? Most people that I work with, they don't know or want to deal with an electrician and then a plumber and then a drywaller. They want somebody to come in, not only manage the project, but bring in the best people in the industry to perform the work. And that's where I brought that to the table, is that it's a whole package.
So I love the idea of Kaizen. It's follow a lot of business circles, and that's kind of exciting. I saw a word in the bio. I heard the word joy, and when I hear about how much dread there is in the average home reno when you're actually trying to stay married to the person you're changing the kitchen with, tell me how you bring joy to this process.
Well, agreed. It's very important in my mind, if somebody's spending tens of thousands of dollars, that they at least enjoy the process and not think of it as like going to the dentist. It should be enjoyable. And one of the first ways that I make it enjoyable is building relationships with the client, seeing them each day, explain to them what we're doing. If they ask any questions, I also sprinkle in some humor to lighten up the situation. And honestly, it's just maintaining a positive attitude is really very important in renovations.
When you started working in the industry, was there something that you found that you saw from other renovators? Because obviously you looked around, like, how do you do this? I don't know if you worked for another company or something to that effect, or you just, decided to do your own kitchen going, I like this process. Is there any element that you going, listen, guys, you can tweak it better?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things is having a central person who will control and understands all the pieces of the puzzle and how they go together and when they go together. A lot of bigger firms that I compete with, they'll have somebody in the design department. And when that person is done with the design, it's thrown over the wall to somebody in operations who's thrown over the wall to a project manager. And the more people you have in the process, the slower it goes and the more likely chances for errors. So to me, I wear many hats in for Delta Designs, and I understand the process from A to Z.
So we've mentioned it, but I'd like you to unpack it. It usually is mentioned in the car business. Can you tell me about Kaizen?
Well, Kaizen, yeah, exactly. So continuous improvement, which has always been a philosophy even before I've got into home renovations. Every project that I do is unique. For many reasons, the customer, the process, the location, everything. So, and every project will have challenges, and we work through the challenges. At the end of every project, I kind of do like a review and say, okay, here's what I did right, but more importantly, what could I improve on? What could make the process even more efficient, more enjoyable, more profitable, obviously. And you can do that on every single project.
So when you're coming across a project, I mean, sometimes going cookie cutter is really super easy, right? Because once you know how to, you want to make a square box, you make the square box again, just replicate. But not all, much like wearing suits, not all suits are off the rack because you do custom work. How do you balance the creativity, but at the same time, like, yeah, that looks really funky, but that's not achievable, or better yet, yeah, we can achieve it, but 2 years from now, though, you'll be looking at me going, "Oh, I don't like that. How are we going to fix that?" Right? How
Yeah.
do you balance that out so that it stays true to course? Because it is a journey, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, doing renovations as opposed to new construction, to me, it's a much more difficult process. In new builds, you create whatever design you want, and somebody's going to build it for you. That's pretty easy. Walking into a home that has existing layout, existing windows, floor layout, and physically just the size of the kitchen you have to work with, those are constraints that I can't change, and I walk into on each and every project. So it is challenging to think through that design and think about what's the best use. If I was in this kitchen, what would be the best use and where would I want things to be laid out? And it's never always exactly what you want. It's always, I wish I could, but here's a chance where, well, in an ideal world, we'd do this, but this is what we have to work with. In addition, as far as people not regretting decisions down the road, I do inform them as much as I can of what things may date, what things may wear. Most importantly, I'll give you an example. A lot of my clients come to me at the beginning and they show me pictures of a kitchen with a wood countertop, and I agree, it looks fantastic in a magazine when it's brand new. But you can imagine with cutting knives and red wine and pasta sauce, what a wood countertop's going to look like after 5 years.
You do good work. Bernie says so. And you're a man of integrity. Have you ever had to tell a client that, yes, I can do what you are asking, but I'm not going to because you're making a mistake? Find somebody else.
To find somebody else has happened rarely. It's the last option, I should say. But yes, I do explain to people that if you do this, this will be the consequences. Or recently I had one where the person is like I'm not going to do that because of safety. Like, it's just not what you're asking me to do is just not safe in the big picture. Well, how about, but then my job is to come up with, okay, what are the other options that could somewhat get to where you want to go, but are completely safe? It's rare occasions. I maybe have one a year, maybe one, yeah, every 6 months at the most, where it's just not a good fit. I try to figure that out early on. In fact, one of the things I tell clients when I'm at the quotation stage is to get other quotes, compare them apples to apples as best you can, which is hard to do, but don't just make your decision based on price. This is a long-term working relationship. This person's going to be in your home for weeks on end, most likely. And you're going to have a lot of challenges to overcome, and it's the relationship is extremely important. So if I don't feel there's a good fit there at the beginning, then I will let the client know. Although again, that's a rare case scenario. Most people appreciate my forthcoming about what to look for and what not to look for. Even if they don't choose me, here's the thing, here's the way you should choose your renovator. And I also use the word renovator. People use the word contractor. Contractor to me is like, well, that just means you work on a contract, right, per se. Where I'm a renovator, I'm renovating the home. And I also like to tell people that I'm not in a business of electrical or drywall. I'm in a service industry. I'm there to provide a service for the client.
It comes having gone through a renovation. And by the way, folks, full disclosure, Colin has just finished and completed a renovation at my location, 2 bathrooms and a kitchen. Outstanding work. So as we're going through the process, a couple of things come up, and for example, if you put in floor heating, the ESA, Actual Standards Authority, has to come by and go, "Hey, we got to peek at that," right? Do you find that government regulations also help guide and structure the framework of what you can provide? Or when you're talking to the client, say, "Listen, I want my steps to be super, super angle high and 4 inches wide," which is great if you happen to be a pigeon, but not so much for a human being. Do you find that helps provide it? And how do you stay ahead of the curve? Because some things are typical and some things are not, because bylaws change every once in a while.
Yeah, they do. They definitely do change once in a while. I mean, when it comes to the ESA, they're very good for 2 reasons. One, it's a double check on your work, right? Everybody can make mistakes. They can find mistakes. And two, at the end of the job, you get issued a certificate to the client that says this was inspected by independent party and meets existing code of that date. It kind of covers me, but it gives a peace of mind to the client. And also when they resell the home, they can show that here's the done. It was done according to the electrical code at that time of the renovation. Now, there are things that when you get into safety, like for example, if steps is the option, I just wouldn't build unsafe steps outside of code. I mean, there's liability issues upon themselves. Even with educating the client, there's just certain things you're just not gonna do because it's just whether that person ends up getting injuring themselves or the next homeowner injures themselves. So it's important to have the code. There is a bit of red tape when you're dealing with the city and inspections, and it can slow things down, as you probably saw. Like you know, we put the wiring and the flooring in, but we had to wait 2 days before the inspection before we could start tiling the floor. So again, but doing this over and over again, I work that into my project layout. And when we're waiting for the inspector to come, we're off doing something different.
One question on marriage counseling and/or divorce lawyers. Have you ever gotten a referral?
No, no, I don't. I don't get any referrals from divorce lawyers. It can be difficult. I mean, it's your home, it's in your space, it's a lot of money, right? It's not chump change at the end of the day. And yeah, and it's two people are going to have two different opinions. So working the way through that can be challenging, but a renovation I think is a lot less expensive than a divorce. Yes.
I'll remember that. I guess I have my roses already handed over to my missus then. We're squared away that way.
Yes.
I noticed though, as you were doing the construction, and not being 20 something, it's like, and I know things change. Like there's ways of doing things that have changed. How do you keep abreast of new ways of constructing a space or renovating a space that, here comes a new tool or it's probably been around for 20 years, but I myself have not renovated a bathroom, but all of a sudden you have these little orange pads with look like little bumps, right? And that's
Yes.
a water seal. How do you stay abreast of the kind of the new tech that's coming out and that's stable?
Well, a good source of that information is your product suppliers. So I typically don't use the box stores when I'm getting materials, only if it's a convenience factor. I will go to specialty stores. Like, for example, the membrane that you're talking about, I buy that from a supplier, and that's all I do is flooring materials. And so they'll have their reps come in, every week or every 2 weeks, come see us, have a coffee and a donut, and here's what we got new coming down the pipe, right? And you listen and you learn. I mean, yeah, some of it may just be marketing, but some of it will come up with a good idea, and not necessarily just a good idea, but a more efficient way of doing things.
What is the biggest myth when you're sitting down with that customer, that man, wife, maybe, or man, I don't know, that first time? What's the biggest myth of hiring a contractor that you have to correct them of?
Usually it's time frames. People watch the TV shows where things are done within 42 minutes. That, of course, is mostly made up smoke and mirrors with a tad of truth built in there. Project, I tell people, if you're doing like a larger project, like a kitchen renovation, you should be starting thinking about it 6 months before you start the renovation. You need a couple months to get quotes, see what's out there, see the different materials. And then once you have selected a renovator, then you have to delve into the design, material selections. And then even after that, like custom cabinetry, from the time that you say, go ahead, this is what I want, to the time that it shows up at your house is easily 2 months by the time it's all done, right? So you really need to plan that out. In fact, a lot of the times I'll be signing a contract in May, but we won't start the project till August, but that's the time. And also based on my availability as well, right? Good guys are booked in advance, right? I'm typically 3 to 6 months in advance, but it's revolving type thing. So it's important to, what they say, educate and set expectations for the client about here's how long this is going to take, and and it may take longer depending on certain conditions. But the other thing you also want to do is there's notoriously companies out there that will tell you the start date, but they don't tell you even an approximate end date. That should be a red flag. Like, I can't tell you the exact minute we're going to be finishing, but I can certainly tell you whether it's going to be 3 months or 4 months or a year.
My dad was a contractor, and so I've been watching the industries outside it for a very long time. And one thing that I find fascinating is the things that come to you, like people and materials, are much more fluid than people think. Like when there was a pandemic and everyone wanted to change their house, all of a sudden there were no contractors because they were all working, or there was no materials because they were all being bought. How do you deal with the fluidity of a moving target, stay sane, and deliver something that could be 18 months away without losing your brain?
Yeah, agreed. Hopefully we never have to go through that COVID issue again, because that was challenging for anybody, to say the least. Agreed. Like, things are fluid. Things can change on a moment's notice. A material might get back ordered, or they ran out of the quantity that you need. So again, the biggest way around that is planning, right? I sketch out my plan. When I do an estimate, I'll do a mind map of how the project is going to come together, break it off into different pieces. Each piece has subtasks, milestones, all that kind of project management. And of course, you got to build in a little bit of fudge factors. Like, okay, they're telling me 6 weeks, but I'm going to pretend that it's 8 weeks and build my schedule around that. If it sits for 2 weeks, that's fine.
So when I'm watching when you orchestrate the whole process, I find it fascinating because you have us, the end user, the client, you have your supplier, and you have another element that's involved. It's called staff. So from a staffing perspective, what's your philosophy behind that?
Well, that's an excellent question, because 90% of my company's really backbone is my staff. So finding great guys with great skills who are positive and easy to work with is a challenge, to say the least. Probably the biggest bottleneck in my company would be finding staff that meet that role. Once I have them, I hold on to them for dear life. Mostly, I mean, first of all, pay. Obviously, we go to work to get paid. And my guys are, in the top paid in the industry in the city that I work in. And on top of that, you gotta treat them as human beings, like, you know, giving them a lot of the times Friday being somewhat of a relaxed day, not working them more than 8-hour days, right? Construction industry is notorious for making people work 16 hours and then have no work for 2 months. No, that's not the way I want to run things. Having said that, I like my time off too. After 6 p.m., that's it. I shut it down. On the weekends, holidays, very minimal effort on my part, and the guys have their time off. It's important. I learned the hard way that you have to have a very clear line between work and not work when you're running your own company.
Do you anticipate scaling in the future? In other words, you go, listen, everybody really loves Colin or Delta Designs. All of a sudden you're going, okay, I'm booking now 12 months to 18 months out. Is that your
Yeah,
hint to kind of ratchet it up and kind of spin up the dial?
yeah, definitely. Definitely want to grow. But the biggest criteria for sure is going to be finding the right staff, because the only thing worse than not finding right staff is finding wrong staff, having a renovation, having the client being upset, and the next thing you know, I'm ripping the entire project out and redoing it again at my cost. I've been close to some past employees, but at the end of the day, too, the only way to find out if the employee is good or great is to try them out, right? This is where the rubber meets the road. There's no way to know that until you put them on a job site, work with the other guys, and figure it out. So yes, absolutely, I wanna grow, and I've tried a couple different routes on how to do that. Some have been better than others.
I find interesting is we pick a city like Ottawa, that a building could be anywhere from brand new to 70 years old in a heartbeat. And the neat stuff is the 70 and 80-year-old stuff. Only the good builders survived because the ones that were junk fell down. But what do you find, if anything, has been lost in the craft because of price or speed that you would like to see back in as a sort of a personal hobby horse of your?
Yeah, a good point. They certainly, as they say, don't build things like they used to. I would have to say that materials are probably the one that has gone really, I don't know, let's say downhill sounds kind of negative. If you look at the cost of Windows, for example, just use Windows for an example, what you're paying and what you're getting is sometimes um, uh, doesn't. It's hard to coordinate those two things. Windows used to be made where you bought them and you thought, okay, well, 30 years or what they called lifetime at the time. Nowadays, I mean, it's a lot of people buy just on price. Well, if you're going to buy the least expensive window, typically there's a reason. And yeah, you might get 5 or 10 years out of it. That's fine. And if that's your goal, okay. But if you really plan to live in your home and this is my home and I'll pass it to other people down the road, that's where you want to look at the higher quality. And the price point will shock most people on what quality counts today. In addition, the guys like the installers, yeah, the better ones I have are the older ones that I have, right? I have one, my crew lead he's from the Netherlands, and he's a craftsman of European type. And I love that. He's not about speed, and neither am I. It's about getting it properly done the first time. And he'll have no problem telling me or the client, whoever else, that's not the way you're supposed to do that. Here's how you're supposed to do that.
Also a good source of wisdom too. Again, my spouse also tapped him for, should I be doing this? And he says, it's up to you, but, and then on goes the Yoda moment. And you're taking all these things together, and again, watching the day-to-day operations. It's one thing to do the macro build out, like in other words, order these parts, they'll come into play. But as the time comes in and you're going from strategic to tactical, but keeping things coordinated. How do you keep things set up so that it's always flowing? Materials on site, the right person on site for that right task. 'Cause some enjoy painting, some enjoy tiling. A master craftsman is extremely good at doing tiles. How do you kind of coordinate that between jobs, let alone a job? Because now, it's, several plates in the air at the same time.
Yeah, no, agreed. It's definitely a challenge to be sure. One of the ways I do it outside of the planning and that type of back being, and you probably saw when we did your project, you'll see me on site 2, 3, 4 times a day. Now, I usually don't go to the site just to check on people. That's not the way I run business, but you'll see me on site. I'll be anything from picking up the waste to bringing materials, right? That type of. My big belief is that you keep your skilled guys working on what they're skilled at and not running to Home Depot and that thing. So I'm covering two things by doing that. I'm taking that task off their list, but I'm on site. I'm seeing them, the client. I'm seeing the job site. I'm seeing the guys, what questions they have, what materials they need, what progress they're making. So visiting sites is your job site often and frequently, and communicating with your guys constantly, basically. Thanks to technology, I'll probably get 20 texts an hour about what different types of things we need to do. So yeah, I would say being on site is probably the number one thing you can do.
A lot of subdivisions were built by one builder for one time. Do you ever get a kick of whether it's the most famous I'm thinking of is the whole back split and the whole, have you ever seen some come and go, some trends come and go that you're just as glad left?
Absolutely. The one that always seems, and I can never figure out why people thought it was a good idea, is the sunken living room. I never understood why you want your living room 12 inches lower than the rest of the first floor. And it just limits everything you can do basically at the end of the day. And I'll often ask, like, what was the purpose of that? I don't know. That's what the builder was doing at the time. So, and you don't really see sunken living rooms anymore. Thank goodness for that.
It's called a trip hazard. Otherwise, yeah, middle of the night,
Yeah.
you're going, or you have a party.
Yeah.
Again, trip hazard.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a danger. It limits your design, limits your layout, it limits, and I don't see what the positive is on doing that. Do you really want to be 12 inches lower than the rest of your floor? I don't know.
Have you come back yet to a house? My father sold a modular home. And the interesting thing is, they're sold or listed the same house to 4 different families. Have you ever found you've done work much for the next generation or even the generation after that and kind of fell in love with this is mine?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. There's one client who who actually, I guess it's more the client that stayed the same, but they moved 3 times, and every time they moved, I got the call and we rebuilt the house. Great client. Love them. But they were like, there's like, okay, this is my new home. And we did the first time. It's like, okay, the second home, completely different, right? Great. And we did all different materials. And the third home, another. So to me, doing different things is enjoyable. Using different materials and different layouts, different clients. That's all the enjoyable process of it. So I had clients that have gone through multiple homes for.
One thing I've discovered on the journey of going through a refit, I know what a floor is, I know what a wall is, I know what a switch is, and I know what a valve is for water. But that being said, and you mentioned earlier pricing, if you go for the economy, it's got likely have a short-lived affair. How do you figure out, or how do you get the client to figure out, listen, here's your spectrum of options, especially if you're doing a budgeting, right? You'll have a budgeted number in there, which is, by the way, I found really handy from our end, which then spurred my spouse to go find, oh, I found a as quality but better pricing, just happens to be further away, which is fine. But there's some products that are, and I'm thinking of the shower valves, for example. I have
Yeah.
you mentioned like four or five different names, and I'm going, I haven't got a clue. Moen and the usual ones that you find in home hardware. Yeah, I recognize those. Riopel and Hansgrohe. My last name is Fransgrohe, but I'm going, that's not a family product. How how do you kind of sort through that? Is that something from experience, or is that something that the plumbing stores have said, listen, here's the range, and this, so you have a better understanding? And how do you get the client to get in that same box and that same mind frame?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a lot of my personal experience. Like for example, Hans Grohe. I've been to their manufacturing plant in Atlanta. Like I've been to the plant, I've walked through. So a lot of it's personal knowledge. And to be honest with you, I find today if you go to a specialty store like a plumbing store, it's like with everything else. The staff turnover is much higher than it used to be. And it's not like people go to school to sell plumbing fixtures. So they're starting from the beginning, right? So a lot of the times you'll get even bad or misinformation going to some of these places. When the client comes back to me and says, this store says I should buy this, if it's great, no problem. But I will give them my opinion on, just like with, I'll use automobiles or models of vehicles. There's a lot of good ones. You got your Hondas, you have your Mercedes and so forth. And and yes, you pay more for them, but here's what you're getting. And so I usually differentiate when that's important and when not, and when it's a wearable item. So, for example, the tile that you put on your floor, once it's installed, it's never going to break unless you do something terrible to it. But your faucet, eventually, for sure, it will need replacement parts. That's anything moving will fail. That's my engineering degree. Mechanical things will eventually fail. It's not a question of if, it's when. So being able to get, first of all, that they last longer, but also just being able to get parts. If you buy a Honda Accord and you need a headlamp, you're going to be able to find lots of options, right? So some obscure model that was imported and the company lasted 2 years, no longer existed. Well, when it fails, you're replacing the actual fixture itself. So faucets is something you definitely want to put money into and research on as well. Now, I agree, everybody can't buy the Mercedes Benz of faucets, but it's good to know where the Hansgrohe fits to the Riabel. Why would you buy one over the other in cost versus price? And also different rooms of the house. Like, the ensuite bathroom is typically where you're going to spend more money because that's a homeowner's bathroom, right? The kids' bathroom, it's all about durability, right? It's not about the looks and all that fancy stuff. It's how long is this going to last as my kids who didn't pay for any of this use it. So it's also room dependent as well.
Assuming you're here for the long term, and I sense you are, the 20 or 21 something who doesn't even know what he wants to be yet, how do you guide him or her into, well, here's what you look good at, how do you help them pick a trade, pick a craft, and let them unpack their wisdom?
Well, I can give a little bit of advice, but honestly, at the end of the day, in my industry, job on the job training is 90%, right? So there's a couple questions. Do you like doing it, first of all? If you don't like doing it, let's say you're doing tiling work. If you don't like tiling and getting mortar on you, then okay, maybe you can do drywall. Or painting or other, and then you try them out. And the best thing is to get pretty good at many different skills, right? Then you can walk into a company like mine and say, yeah, you need me to do drywall this day? Okay, no problem. And I'll be doing tile the next day? No problem at all. That's definitely a learning experience. I can't say, if I hired somebody that young, it would be more like I'm doing them a favor. Because when you have no experience, you don't are not productive. And that's the same with everybody in life, right? The first time you do something, not going to be good. Second time, probably not still going to be good. But after a couple of years, then you're probably going to get good at it. The other difference is that a lot of people, especially young people, come in and go, "Well, I don't want to go to. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be a drywaller." You coming in thinking it's a part-time job to get to your next whatever you figure out you want to do. That's fine, but that's not what companies really are looking for. I want a guy who's like, "This is going to be my career. I want to get good at it, and I want them." And you should probably know, most people know, if you're good at it in the trades, you can make pretty good money doing it. If you're a hard worker and you show up and you improve, you can make good money if you treat it as your professional career.
Do you ever have clients that are like us? For myself, a residential owner. Do you ever have clients that are, hi, I have a block of apartments or a block of townhomes, and I got to go. I got 5 of them in a row. They're going to either vacant or person's moving out. I got to flip it around. Right? Do you get involved in those type of arrangements?
I often get asked to provide quotes. And I'm never turned them down. I go look at them quite often because you can figure out the economies of scale when you're doing multiple units, especially if they're the same. When it comes to rental units or flip units or those types of things, usually there's one huge deciding factor for the owner, and that's time and price, right? They don't really care if that shower valve is going to last 15 years or 20 years. So that house will be owned by somebody else in 6 months or renting or that somebody else, right? Somebody else's problem. My clients are really like you and Lisa. This is our home. We plan to stay here for the indefinite future. We want it to be nice and quality, and we want it done properly the first time. We don't care if it takes a little bit longer to get to. So yeah, multi-units, rentals, that type of thing are interesting, but the owner typically is looking at it from a slightly different angle than you and Lisa are, in that it's the quality and is the quality of construction, the layout, the choices are super important because you're going to be you're going to be paying for them, and you're going to be living there for many years. A flip unit or a rental unit, yeah, they need to last. That's important as a landlord, but it's mostly about time and how quick you can get it done so it can get back on the market to be either sold or rented again. It's not craftsmanship is the number one thing they're looking for.
You just brought it up that in a backhanded way. I like it. There's always in business something called the unique selling proposition. And one of the neat things is knowing what you don't do. And I'm sensing you know who your client is and who your client isn't from even this interview. Can you tell me in your mind, what do you think makes Delta Designs different than some of the people you would can say were competitors?
Yeah, agreed. First of all, as in all business, knowing who the decision maker is of the utmost importance. And not to sound chauvinistic, but usually it's not the husband of the household who's the final decision maker, right? My decision maker is usually the woman of the house, and that's good because then I have a hierarchy. So at the end of I really am selling to her at the beginning. He's usually coming along for the ride, but usually it's mostly about questions about price and things like that. So knowing who your homeowner is, and that's getting to know people. Like every person, every couple is different, right? They have different how they approach things and that type of thing. So getting to know your client, especially at the estimation quotation stage, is very important, not just for the client, but also for me to figure out what exactly they're looking for. I do concentrate on listening to what the client is telling me about what they want and what they don't want. Quite often I've seen where designers will say, well, I really like the look of wood countertops. And the client is saying, yeah, but what about maintenance? Right. And then the designer would just shove it off and say, oh, I don't care, because that person is not going to end up maintaining the countertop, right, at the end of the day. So listening to your client and sometimes repeating the concern or just delving into their concern a bit deeper to make sure you understand what exactly is it that they're trying to tell you they don't want or what they do want. For example, countertop space. Okay, well, why do you need more countertop space? It may just be because, you know what, you got a huge microwave sitting on the countertop. Well, I can solve that problem by shrinking the microwave and putting it out on into a cabinet, right? I just increased your countertop without actually changing the countertop. So it's not just, it's about the usable area of the countertop is what's the most important to them.
Ernie gets a lot of these podcasts. There's a lot of interest in the Western United States. Do you do a lot of work in Nevada?
Yeah, not these days.
So lads, so we're going to go on a road trip. Just gonna have to bring a change of clothes. So basically, I was trying to have some fun, and it was good. What area do you like to serve, and how do we get a hold of you?
Great question. So, the greater Ottawa area is, but it doesn't necessarily mean the city. I've done jobs outside in little communities like Greeley and those types of places as well. And yeah, so I mean, deltadesigns.ca is my website. You can simply go on there, fill in the contact information. It goes directly to my cell phone, and you'll be getting a call within the hour. But for licensing reasons, I really don't work on the Quebec side of things. They have a whole unique set of laws that to be an Anglophone makes it challenging to say the least. Ontario, Greater Ottawa area.
So, fun question. What's the funniest thing you ever found hidden in a wall? You or your team? That doesn't have
I
a
had
criminal. That's not.
well, I'll tell you, and I haven't told you the story yet, Bernie, but back some years ago, Jim and I just started working together. Jim, he's my lead hand. And he was working at a house, and I did the estimate, went to see the client, and she was a nice lady. It was a bit different in that she had, what do you call them, terrariums. So she was into tarantulas and lizards and snakes. I think, okay, that's whatever, to each his own. So we started working there maybe 2 months later, and I see on the news that there had been, and this I think was actually out in Canada, actually, and they said there was she had a large python snake who got loose. So there's a whole big thing in the news, watch out for the kids, that type of thing. So we didn't know, they thought he got outside and just managed. Well, so Jim, who's working away, is tearing apart the wall. Guess what he finds in the wall? And it was, I mean, shocked is an understatement, to be sure. But yeah, so he actually found a python.
The wee folk hidden behind the wall, except the wee folk is really long and not so wee.
Yeah, wee.
That's funny. I want to say thank you. It's been a great podcast having you here. My co-host Wayne Pratt and you, the Knack for Business listeners. So kind of the key takeaways out of this whole thing. One, if you're looking to do your renovations in your house, bathroom, kitchen, whatever, reach out to Colin if you happen to be in the Ottawa area. That's kind of key. And knowing full well, and I can vouch for this, his team are actually easy to get along with and easy to work with. Highly, highly skilled, highly just really decent folk, right? And you almost want to be able to break bread with them all the time. In fact, we're going to miss them because work's done, right? I keep going, but have to compensate for the work done. So that part, and if you want to understand about the Kaizen piece, again, reach out to Colin. But you know what? If you're in the area, reach Delta Designs. They do a great job.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.